If you're someone like me who is a highly analytical thinker and enjoys approaching everything, even human interaction, with a strategic mindset of figuring out how things work and how to optimize them, then this video is for you. I want to give you 5 specific practical tips for communication, especially in romantic relationships, how to talk to your partner. But this also applies to friends or coworkers or any human, really. And all 5 of these seem pretty simple on the surface, but I promise you that if you can master doing these 5 things consistently, it will completely transform your relationships with people. And you're much more likely to get what you want and much more likely for both of you to feel good. So, tip number 1 is frame things in a positive way. I know that seems obvious and silly, but notice the difference. If I tell my partner, why don't you text me more often? I text you all the time, and you hardly ever reply to me. You take forever to reply. Why don't you do it more? Right? Notice how that feels to hear me say that. Right? It's framing it in such a negative way. Here's what's wrong with you. Instead of a positive way of saying, hey, I love getting texts from you. Would you be willing to send me texts more often? Right? I love how it feels to receive messages from you. Would you be open to doing that more? Right? So you're framing it in something that feels good for them to receive. Right? So if you think about this just at a core level, how can you make the other person feel good instead of feel bad? Right? At a very basic organismal level, we like feeling good. We don't like feeling bad. Right? Tip number 2, present your issues or requests one at a time. Do not go to your partner with a list of grievances, right? That you pull open your phone and, okay, let's go through the following 10 items that I have gathered over the past week of all the things you've done wrong, right? If it feels bad to get one negative thing, think about how bad it feels to see your partner pull out a list of negative things that they're about to relate to you. Especially if you're the type of person like me who tends to pattern match and connect the dots, and you start to see, oh, well, they did this thing. Oh, and that's related to this other thing they did, and this other thing. Okay, well, I'm going to present my case with a list of all these things that they've done, and that will make it clear to them what the pattern is, and that will help them change, right? So you might come to it for a good reason, thinking that if I can present the whole pattern, that's going to provide a more compelling argument, that's going to get things, help them do things differently. But I promise what it's actually going to feel like is that you're attacking them with a barrage of issues. So the simple way to fix this is to either just focus on the most important one, or even better, to reduce the amount of time between when a thing happens and when you talk about it. So best case is as soon as that thing happens, they say something, and instead of storing it for later, you immediately say, oh, wow, that didn't feel good right in the moment, right? Or maybe it happens too quickly. You don't really realize it didn't feel good. Maybe later tonight you realize, or maybe tomorrow. Okay, great. Then can you go up to them and say, hey, I want to let you know that thing you said earlier today actually didn't feel great, right? It might feel a little awkward that it happened earlier, but better to say it now than a week from now. Tip number 3, be very careful to use as many I statements as possible instead of you statements, right? Especially I feel. So instead of saying, why do you do this? Or you did this? Or can you stop doing this? Right? It's framing that in terms of you. And the assumption is you did something wrong. You should change. Instead of framing it in I terms, right? I feel this. It feels bad to me when I would like, and sometimes, you have to use the word you as well, right? But try to frame the overall thing in terms of you. So you might say, like, when you said that thing, I felt scared, and it made me feel further away from you. I would like to feel close to you. So would you be willing to do this? So notice how that whole thing, I'm not framing it in terms of, you did this thing, that was wrong, you need to stop doing that. Sometimes maybe that's called for if they did something really bad. If they caused actual harm, maybe you need to set a really firm boundary. But for most things, instead of saying, you did this bad thing, you need to change, here's what you need to do differently, if you say, when you said this, here's how it impacted me, here's what I would like, would you be willing to do this for me? Right? So it's focusing on, I felt this way. And when you say the you part, when you said this, when you did this, imagine that you're framing it in terms of what a third party would see. Imagine a video camera watching the scene. So you can only say things that the video camera would see or the microphone would hear, right? So you can say, when you said this, or when you turned your head away from me, or when you slammed the door. You can't say, when you were judging me, right? Do you know that they were judging you? Right? Or when you were angry at me, do you know for sure they were angry? Right? Only say you things that an objective observer would be able to see. That way it stays more neutral. So you're saying, when this neutral thing happened, I felt this way. Tip number 4, related to this, is to be very careful of assumptions that you make. Assuming that the person did something for a certain reason, or assuming they were thinking something, or wanting something, right? And the even more powerful version of this is really at a more existential level, to notice any way that you are orienting yourself in terms of, these are the rules. This is how things should be. This is what a good person looks like. This is the obvious way that any normal person would behave here. Any good person would do this. Any ethical person would do this. Any caring person would do this. But you didn't do this. Right? You are assuming that the world works a certain way, that good people look a certain way, that anyone should understand these rules. Right? So things to look for is if you think, well, this is just what respect looks like. This is just what love looks like. Right? Is that true? Do you know that's true in every culture around the world? Is that what love looks like? Is that what respect looks like? Right? So a really good example of this is time. Being on time or being late. Right? People have different cultures, have very different orientations around this. And individual people do. Right? So for some people, if someone is 2 minutes late, in their world, in the person who was waiting, right? They might think, you are not respecting me. We agreed on this time, and you're 2 minutes late. That means you're not a professional. That means you're not respecting me. That means I can't trust you. That attitude is showing that this person lives in a certain paradigm, a certain worldview, where they believe that you need to be exactly on time. Whereas to the other person, maybe they believe, well, 2 minutes late, no big deal. I'm 15 minutes late, maybe that's a big deal, but 2 or 3 minutes late, well, whatever. I'm trying my best. Maybe I got delayed, who knows? And so I think for both of those people, they need to evaluate, well, here's the paradigm that I'm working under. Here's how my mind sees this, but recognizing that other people see things a different way. So instead of assuming, one person could easily assume, well, it's obvious that you need to be on time. Any normal person would know if we agree on 3 o'clock, it means 3 o'clock. It doesn't mean 3:02, right? Whereas the other person might say, what's wrong with you? Who cares? 3:02, it's not a big deal. If you say 3, it means somewhere between 3 and 3:05, right? Chill. Neither one of those people is right or wrong. They're both just have different worldviews, both have different ways of seeing time. And so instead of assuming that one is the obvious way, of course you should be on time, or of course it's okay to be a little more easygoing here, you speak your assumptions, right? You could say, hey, I want you to know I'm someone for whom being on time is really important. So I know some people are kind of more chill around this, but for me, it's really important that we start when we say we're going to start. So, would you be willing to make an effort to meet me right on time? Right? Or, hey, I'm someone who tends to run a little late. I know that you like being on time, but are you willing to give me a little grace? I'll try my best to be on time, but are you willing to, recognize that uh, I'm just someone who sometimes takes a little longer? So the key here is, again, noticing if you are holding things as if there are certain rules, certain ways that this is just how reality works. This is how the universe works. This is what a good person looks like. And see if you can speak those out loud, make certain requests, and relax those standards a little and maybe be more open to other ways of seeing things. So number 5 is taking radical ownership. And this is really recognizing that every human is an individual being with their own agency. You don't own anyone else. You don't control anyone else. And so you have to be really careful about this, especially in romantic relationships, to think that, this other person has to do things your way. Or, just because you are someone who likes being on time, that they have to meet you there. They have to also be someone who's always on time. And if they don't, it means they don't love you. It means they don't respect you. They don't care, right? Is that actually true? No. You just see things differently. And so what does it mean to really approach a relationship seeing that you are a full, liberated human, independent, who is living your own life, and I am a full human with my own agency who's living my own life. And even if we're romantic partners, even if we live together, even if we're married or whatever, we are still individual humans with agency. And that means negotiation, compromise, sure, but we are still each individual, fully self-governed humans. And so real radical ownership means taking responsibility for what you feel. If this person, if you ask for something and this person doesn't want to do it, can you accept that they're not doing it wrong and you're doing it right? You are just two independent humans, each living your own life. And so one example of this might be love languages. Like, let's say I am someone who loves giving gifts, and I love making it a really big deal. I put so much effort into the gift. I make this fancy card, and it's like this whole thing that they have to unwrap layer after layer, and there's going to be like this whole puzzle element to get to the center, and I have a very specific vision. When I give them this gift, I want it to go a certain way. Right? I want them to carefully open it and have this smile blooming on their face, and I want them to excitedly open each layer and, oh my gosh, wow, Michael, I can't believe you put so much effort into this. I love you so much. This is incredible. You can see where this is going, right? Let's say that is my version of reality. This is what I think any good person who sees the amount of effort I put into this gift, anyone should love this. Anyone should love me. That is the proper response. And now let's say my partner looks at it and says, oh, that's nice. And they quickly open it and get to the center and, oh, thanks. That's not how I wanted it to go, right? Does that mean that they're a bad person and I'm a good person? Or that I have the right way of doing gifts and they have the wrong way? No, it just means we're different. And so if I take radical ownership here, it means I recognize a lot of what I was doing there was actually for me, not for them. I wanted a certain experience. I had an expectation that I wanted them to validate me. I wanted them to give me a gift of feeling really excited in the way that I wanted. But there are different types of love languages. Maybe my partner hates gifts. Maybe they feel a lot of pressure knowing how important they are to me, so it feels like they have to perform, like I am testing them. You better have a minimum level of excitement here. Oof, that doesn't feel good. Right? And so maybe for them, their love language is quality time. They don't care about physical objects at all. They just want to spend time with me. And maybe for them, they have a really busy schedule. And so when they carve out time in their schedule purposefully to be with me, that's how they express love. Right? So then it's on me to take radical ownership and notice, well, if that's how they express love, can I appreciate that? Can I see that the fact that they're here with me means that they care about me, even if they didn't like my gift. Okay? And radical ownership also means saying, if that's really important to you, you can ask for something like, hey, so are you open to having a conversation about how we do gifts? Cool. Well, yeah, I'm the kind of person who likes making these fancy, elaborate gifts, and, it's kind of sad for me. It's a bit disappointing sometimes when you have a meh reaction. You're not really excited after all the effort that I've put into. And I don't want to force you to be a certain way, but is there some way that I could do gifts differently that would make you excited? Is there some way that I could help you enjoy them more? Right? And they might say, well, yeah, actually, I would love a gift of experience. I don't want an object. I want to go do something with you. If you gave me that kind of gift, I would love it. Right? So, and then maybe some people would say, oh, I love surprises. I want you to give me something totally unexpected. Or someone else might say, you know what? I hate surprises. I love choosing what I want. So I'm going to make an Amazon wish list of the gifts that I want, and I want you to get something on there. Cool. So now you get to give gifts in a way that works for them. All right. So the 5 tips again are: frame it in the positive. Silly emoji. So frame it in the positive. Number 2 is don't just give a list of grievances all at once, right? If you have a piece of constructive feedback or something that you want to talk about that might feel negative, just do it one at a time. Pick the most important thing, and ideally, explain it as soon as possible after it happens, instead of kind of storing it for later and then adding those things up. Number 3, as much as possible, talk about your experience. I feel. Use I statements instead of you statements. And if you're using a you statement, make sure it's objectively verifiable. It's something that a video camera or a microphone would actually pick up, not something that you think they're imagining. Number 4 is be very careful of assumptions and worldviews, and imagining that you see things the right way and that this is just what a good person looks like, or this is the proper response, or these are the rules that everyone should know. Right? And instead imagine existentially, what if there are no rules? What if there's no right way of living? This is the way that you want to live. Cool. You can explain that. Here's what I want. Right? But it's not the objective right way. It's just your subjective way. And then number 5 is take radical ownership and remember that every human has their own agency. Okay? So I hope at least one of those resonated with you and feels useful. I'd love to hear in the comments how this goes if you try these out with a partner or a friend or someone else. And let me know if you have any questions. I hope you have a nourishing day.